Councilmember Chad West proudly serves District 1 residents on the Dallas City Council. North Oak Cliff residents first elected West in May 2019 and re-elected him in 2021, 2023, and most recently in 2025 for his fourth and final term. Prior to his election to City Council, West served on the Dallas City Plan Commission from 2017 to 2018. There, West was a key advocate for and drafter of the live work, accessory dwelling units, and inclusionary zoning ordinances, all of which are currently being used by the City of Dallas today to create more rooftops for residents of all income levels. On council, West initiated and carried the reform of Dallas' antiquated parking code. West continues to be one of the most vocal advocates for greater walkability, connected neighborhoods, long-range area planning, workforce housing, and expansion of the parks and trail system. He is currently working to bring the first skateboard park to South Dallas. West is an avid runner, tennis player, historical fiction reader, Texas Tech Red Riders fan, and a struggling golfer. So thanks, Councilmember Chad West, for being here with us.
Thank you.
I'm going to introduce Andrea now. Andreea Udrea serves as Deputy Director of Planning and Zoning within the Planning and Development Department of the City of Dallas. The team holds all planning functions from planning to permitting. The team is also facilitating and acts as administrator of the City Plan and Zoning Commission and its subcommittees. This way, Andrea gets to view the whole life cycle of the parking requirements from idea and how communities react to what actually gets built. Andrea is also a European planner, moved to the United States from Bucharest, Romania, where she led the planning agency for City of Bucharest and was an assistant professor with the University of Architecture and Urban Planning, Ion Mincu, in Bucharest. She holds a bachelor's, master's, and a European PhD in planning from the University of Architecture and Urban Planning, Ion Mincu, from Bucharest, Romania, and she is certified American planner with the American Institute of Certified Planners. Thanks so much for being here with us, Andrea.
Thank you for having me.
And last but not least, Bryan is the Executive Director and co-founder of the Dallas Housing Coalition, a member-driven housing advocacy nonprofit that first launched in June 2023 around a $200 million bond campaign for attainable housing and homeless solutions. Since then, the coalition has grown to include over 400 non- and for-profit organizations and individual members, supported the updating of Dallas Comprehensive Land Use Plan, hosted 2 annual housing summits with over 500 participants, tackled reforming Dallas' antiquated and onerous parking requirements, and mobilized during Texas' 89th legislative session. He was appointed to be the organization's first executive director by its board of directors in January 2025. Thanks for being here with us, Bryan.
Glad to be here.
Okay, with all this said, I'm going to stop sharing and let the panel begin.
All right, I will kick off our panel discussion here. I'm going to be moderating today. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Daniel Harrigus. I'm the policy director at PRN. Definitely, reiterate that you're all encouraged to post your questions in the chat as we're going. We'll have plenty of time for audience Q&A, I think, at the end here. So without further ado, just to orient everyone, I want to briefly summarize what it was that passed the City Council in Dallas last year in May of 2025 by a vote of, I believe, 14-1. Dallas instituted sweeping reforms of its parking mandates, the first major update of the parking code since 1965. There's a bunch of nuance to sort of, if you were to dig into the code, what exactly is in there. I will attempt to summarize, and our panelists can correct me if I get any of this wrong. But Dallas eliminated parking mandates downtown and within half a mile of light rail and streetcar stations. Eliminated mandates for offices and most retail, eliminated most residential parking mandates while maintaining some requirements for large developments, 1 parking space per unit for multifamily housing over 200 units, reducing parking mandates for bars and restaurants and removing them completely for establishments under 2,500 square feet. So really targeting small businesses, neighborhood serving businesses. And then eliminating parking mandates for designated historic buildings. So this was the culmination of a lot of work by a lot of people. And I want to start us off with Councilmember Chad West to maybe give us the origin story here. I think I'm interested both in your parking reform story. You know, how did you become interested in this issue and convinced that it was something important to work on? And then maybe tell us a little bit about how this reform proposal, you know, initiated and gained ground in Dallas.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you got it right, pretty much all the major statistics. So Bryan is, I'm a big housing advocate too, and so the little bit fast forward piece of this is that as I started digging into the cost of parking and started learning just how expensive it was and how it impacted housing affordability, I became a real big acolyte for parking reform, but that's not how it originally started for me. I was on the Plan Commission, and it was a crazy, just a one-off zoning case, actually. We had a boutique hotel that was wanting to open up in this old Art Deco 1920s building right next door to my walkable district called the Bishop Arts District. If you can Google it, you'll see it's one of our best little walkable entertainment districts in the city of Dallas, and it's part I represent the area. And because there weren't any zoning overlays over it, it was just this area that had this old zoning. To put the hotel end up doing the hotel, they were going to need to park all 13 rooms of that hotel with 13 parking spots. And this is on a like a third of an acre, by the way. And then they also wanted to do this like beautiful like cabana with a pool and a 2,500 square foot restaurant in the back. Well, because the restaurant wasn't connected to the building, they were going to also have to park, I think it was 15 parking spaces, if I remember correctly, for the restaurant separately. And so the the parking didn't assume that someone in the hotel would be eating at the restaurant. It didn't assume that anyone would take transit. And there, oh, by the way, there's a streetcar stop, by the way, a streetcar right next door. It didn't take into account the transit, the commingling of the people in the hotel, or the fact that the Bishop Arts District already had very limited parking and is literally like 2 blocks away. So it was just because it was in this old code, which was still most of the city, that it was all messed up. Well, fortunately, the Plan Commission got it right. They really greatly reduced the parking requirements, and we were able to get the case through. And that really opened my eyes, and I think a lot of plan commissioners' eyes at the time to, all right, we need to relook at our parking code. And then I started digging more into the cost of parking on housing, and it just continued from there. For me, that was my journey.
Gotcha. So, yeah, and my understanding is that these reforms they were described to me. You know, I joined PRN in 2024, so got involved at the tail end of the process. But that in some ways this was a 6-year process at the city of Dallas. So
It was a long process. It was.
Yeah, can you give us an overview of the twists and turns there?
We started it, Andrea, were you around, or Bryan, when we first filed it? I was trying to think back of
It
how
was,
it was a 5 signature memo, right? That we kicked it off.
yeah, it was in 2019 and it
Yeah,
started by an authorization by CPC, the City Plan Commission, that you basically just left, you were a council member and I think you had a memo at council and then City Plan Commission authorized it by a 3 signature memo.
that's right. We asked
Yeah,
the
I was
plan commission to do it. Yeah.
exactly. I was a senior planner with the zoning team. I was very happy that this happened. And then I decided to switch careers from reviewing zoning cases to doing code amendments. And they were like, okay, good luck. You're going to do the parking reform. And that's it. The rest is history.
Yeah, and on our city council in Dallas, you have to initiate a code amendment or a zoning change. You can either do a 5 signature memo with 5 council members out of 15 council members, or the plan commission can do it with only 3 out of 15. And so if it's a more hot political issue, we'll send it down to the plan commission. And I think back in those days, we didn't have early support for parking reform. So it was going to be easier to get it started in the plan commission level. And that's why I did that now that I think back to that. I remember council members raising their eyebrows back then, but I don't think they ever thought it would take off. But staff, fortunately, and the advocates like Bryan, picked it up and ran with it.
I'd love to talk a little bit about the role of staff here. I think, really a major goal of ours in doing webinars like this at PRN is to educate people on, not just the merits of parking reform, but on how it happens. It's not just a black box where you convince the right number of people of the issue and then they vote and then it happens. But so to talk a little bit about sort of the machinery. So Andrea, I'm going to go to you with this question. It seems that from the outside, I think it's sometimes hard to understand the influence that planners exercise. You're hired staff. You're theoretically there to implement policy and not to set policy, but there's a huge amount of work that you and your team do to take, a more general kind of directive and turn it into an actual ordinance. And in the process of that work, I presume some ability to influence the questions that are asked, the scope of the reforms that are proposed, and to try to shape that policy to be as strong as possible. So I'd love to hear from you a little bit about, once you've got that 5-member memo, or in this case, that 3-member memo from the Planning Commission, what does it look like on the planning department side to really try to put something together that's robust?
Well, thank you for the question. It started a little bit like, let's test the waters. Even the memo that mandated the work to us was a little bit narrower to just look at parking ratios for this uses, and it had a list of uses. And then it was a different climate with staff. I was a senior planner in a department that kind of like didn't like to expose themselves and show their necks a lot. So we were very cautious. And the discussions in the department, again, 2019 were like, oh, we're just going to address these uses. We're just going to shave them by 10%, and that's it. And as I said, by that time, I've been doing zoning cases, and I've seen exactly what Councilmember West has seen, that everything that we do comes down to like parking and parking stops, things that probably you need. So I just moved to code amendments team. I got to manage the case, and I just started working on it, and it became all or nothing. I think, and then staff changed. Like it's a big organization, things evolved, and I think it started with me as a senior planner and ended with me as assistant director. So I went through all of these, but again, the goal and the goalpost was always the same. We never moved it. Staff, I think, is crucial. And I know, and you guys know, like I joined the parking reform in the beginning. I think when we started, the movement was very new. I started to do a lot of research. The Parking Reform Network, I think it was just in the beginnings. I joined, I just was so avid for data and for a support group because I had none except Councilmember West, but I was so buried that I didn't have access to like-minded people in the city. Bryan was not an advocate back then. So I kind of like, okay, we need to do something. So I think the most important portion that I would like for any planner, for the most important advice that I have for any planner or any staff is to just, your role is crucial. You have to have a steady hand. That's what I tell my team. That's what we always do. Like, that you have to do something and you just have your steady hand, because at the end of the day, you're going to create solutions. Policy is already set. I'm sorry, parking mandates are not policy. Parking mandates are regulations. This is where staff can thrive and propose solutions. So if you know and you are very, very forthcoming and the community knows that that's where you're at, I think everything is going to start to garner and start to like come together around you. And I think that was the key to our success. We knew that we wanted to shift. We knew that we wanted to solve things. We knew that it's going to be all or nothing. just because, and when you do that, you leave so much room for compromise and so much room for discussions for the decisions makers. And I think that's key. Again, I will tell staff it's hard. You're going to take the punches. Everybody's going to accuse you, but you're going to have to do it, because otherwise, if we don't have the togetherness, it's not going to happen. And yeah, I don't know. I think I stepped into this in a moment where Dallas, exactly what Councilmember was saying, everybody was raising eyebrows. And I think just because we were so steady or so forthcoming and so transparent that that's the goal, I think it kind of like sparked a little bit the genuine conversation, and we started to gather advocates around us. And I did like the movement. I don't know. I think you have to be, I cannot say this enough. I think staff needs to lead on their portion of the partnership pretty convinced, because the second you shake, that's it, it's done.
I latched onto one thing that you said there about, just sort of the change in the overall environment, the palatability of these issues, even over the course of time that you were deliberating this and working on this in Dallas. And certainly, when I think about the overall parking reform movement, to go from 2019, where there was some talk of it. There was a list of major U.S. cities that had done it, and they were in the Northeast. There was Buffalo, there was Hartford, there was San Francisco, and I think people would have said, "Dallas, are you kidding me?" Like Cartopia, like there's no way that Dallas is going to go for this. And by
Yes.
2025, it is a vastly different atmosphere. Um, and part of that is just to insist on having the conversation. But probably also a shift in, the strength of advocacy, in the broader community and the issues that the community is willing to rally around. So I'd love to go to Bryan, who we haven't given a chance to speak yet. Can you talk a little bit about, introduce us to the Dallas Housing Coalition? What is your organizing model? How do you go about your advocacy? And then, as relates to this proposal, what were the strategies that you used?
Yeah, thank you. And I wasn't an advocate because I wasn't opposed to it. I wasn't an advocate because we were nervous about parking reform or didn't understand the impact on development at the time. 2018 to 2020, I was working at a commercial real estate association called the Real Estate Council, and the Dallas Housing Coalition didn't come into formation until June of 2023. So was very much a fan from the sidelines, and was happy to see Councilmember West and Andrea's leadership, both internally and publicly speaking and about parking reform. And we had some great leadership on our city plan commission at the time, with a chairman named Tony Shadid, who represented Southeast Dallas. And by promoting the different benefits that these updates could have, we hosted a webinar with Tony Jordan from Parking Reform Network and Felicity Maxwell in Austin, so we could point to Austin and look at what they had done with eliminating mandates. We had seen some other cities coast to coast that PRN collected, who, the sky didn't fall down once parking was reformed, or at least some of those mandates and requirements were removed. And like those were, some education that we needed to take on with the community, that we produced a one-pager and provided to all city council. And I put that link in the chat too, and you're all welcome to, use that. But we had just come off of a comprehensive land use plan update. Dallas is visioning itself as a more walkable, mixed-use, connected city. And by swapping out parking spaces with living spaces, we can turn that vision into a reality. So we try to bring as much positive messaging to it as possible, answer the FAQs, bring our advocates along with Dallas Neighbors for Housing to the various city council and city plan commission meetings to speak in favor of the reforms being proposed. And we knew that there were going to be compromises along the way, but we were really happy with the final product, and all that went into that procedure, from start to finish.
One thing I found interesting, and I think this is often kind of an underrated strategy, but that I saw you folks do, and that you brought PRN in to be involved with from time to time, was really just one-on-one persuasion. Tony Jordan and I joined a few meetings with members of the Planning Commission. Ultimately, I mean, the broader grassroots advocacy, the being able to bring people out to the meeting, being able to bring people to tell their stories, changes the political environment, but also you've got an audience of the people who are ultimately going to be casting the vote on this. So I'm curious, and then I guess this question could really be for any of you three who want to chime in. What challenges do you find in doing that sort of direct persuasion, on the planning commission or on the city council? What were the sources of skepticism that you had to overcome, or what strategies do you find to be effective in opening up people's minds who maybe didn't come in kind of open to this issue?
Guys want me to jump in first? All right, I'll do it. First, before I forget, I just want to say that I agree with everything both of these guys, Andrea and Bryan, said. We need, like, you've got the three pieces on here. You've got your elected, your staff, and your advocates. And without that three-legged stool, I don't think big policies can change in cities. And we've seen that where it's failed because you haven't had support from one end or the other. Before this current regime of staff at City Hall, like, we had a planning department that was the opposite, really. I mean, it was, I remember an old planning director when I was in plan commissioner who was like, we will never reduce parking requirements. Like, I mean, she wanted to park everywhere, you know. That was it. That was it. That's kind of a non-starter because staff can slow roll things, even if electeds yell and scream about it, and make it really difficult for us. So, the main thing we saw from the electeds and appointeds side is they would think of very specific instances where parking had been a problem for them in their district or in their experience. So very insular. The way Dallas is set up is we are 14 little kingdoms. And we each, I represent about 100,000 people in my area. And it's very different in my district than it is in like far North Dallas, where they want to drive everywhere, and then you've got the downtown areas. And so we all have very different perspectives where we're coming from. And usually our planning commissioners we appoint are kind of a reflection of who we are. So the individual conversations that you mentioned, Daniel, like, and how important it is to have these one-offs and talk through situations with people are so critical. Staff spending time with everyone, and then opening people's minds to other issues besides just their one experience. And that's why I think for me, what Bryan's big thing now is housing. He's the housing coalition guy, is learning that housing affordability is so tied to parking concerns. Environmental issues are tied to excessive parking in cars and pavement and all of that. Finding what that that policy issue is that can shift council members or plan commissioners' minds is so important. For a lot of my colleagues in Dallas, it was housing affordability. And I would use every opportunity I could when I'm talking about housing affordability to tie in a note about parking. And it's just that strategy that you pepper your conversations with over and over again. And eventually you start like winning hearts and minds over. And staff does it too, I'm sure. I have no doubt that they're doing that and being strategic. So the initial pushback, to sum up what I was just saying, was that individualized, okay, this is the only vision I have, and it's opening that up to the bigger picture of what parking is, and that it's not just something that, like, those of us who are like the walkability, I want to walk and bike everywhere wonks, like me and most of my residents, like, there's so much more benefit to reducing parking than just that. And it affects housing, environment, all the stuff I said. So that's my piece on that.
I can go next. I would say that very, very important for me is that I'm always like very honest and transparent. I mean, I can have a poker face, but not with things that I am really passionate about. So I think that is always helpful, because when people read you and they're comfortable knowing where you're at, I think it's a different type of conversation, even if you don't agree. Like, I think for me, it always worked. So I'm always like, everybody knows that if we're talking, I'm always gonna call it like it is or how I see it, but I can always change my mind. It's not like, oh, yes, I keep on saying, yes, we fixate. Yes, we have a steady hand, but if it doesn't line up, it doesn't. So I think honesty and transparency was crucial, especially when talking to one-on-one with any decision maker, city plan commissioners, council members, the advisory commissioners, including like community leaders. Another thing that I think I always do is I always show my cards. Like I kind of like took for granted the fact that I'm a public servant. We have no privacy. I don't have a privacy of thoughts either. So I work in planning. I'm not in other sides of public servants. So everything that we do as planners is public. So that's why I'm always showing my cards. Everything that I say and I work towards is always public. Always am avid for any type of stories that the reluctant people have. And I always ask, give me examples of these bad things, and I'm going to explore them. I'm going to do all the homework that you can imagine. I think a big winning card in the parking reform was that we had a lot of council members that were exactly as Councilmember West is saying, but in my district, this is what's happening. And I always said, okay, you have to give me those addresses. And then I worked with code compliance. I worked with everybody, with permitting, with everybody to find out, is it a parking supply issue, or is it a behavior issue, or is it a management issue? And once you give all the data and explain, this is how I read it as a planner, and I'm telling you, the minimums are not your problem. Your problem is probably property management, then you can do this, or is transportation management on street. But once it clicks, and even if it doesn't click for that certain person, it's going to click for the others around them. And I think that's very important. Another important piece is that Councilmember West kept on calling us back to City Council, which gave us platform that we're still on it. It takes 6 years, but we're still there, like we're working. And gets me to my next point. I think for a city like Dallas, allow things to breathe sometimes help. And in the parking reform, it really helped for us to sit on it for a little bit, because it becomes old news and people don't react the same as they do. And they build better arguments, but you also build better arguments. So I think, as I said, keep your steady hand, obsess, fixate. Know that I'm telling you, I don't think there was any council member or any commissioner that knew that when they will talk to me about the parking reform, I'm gonna be like, yes, it needs to be no minimum. But that's not the conversation we're having. I'm not convincing you, you're not convincing me. We're just exploring at this point. And I think that's that type of honesty, I think, is very important. I explored any scenario that I was given, any doom scenario that I was given, I explored. And I'm so thankful that during this parking reform, I stepped into leadership and I had the tool set and the resources to do so. I think that was important as well.
Yeah, we had
Go ahead,
common
Bryan.
questions that we heard, and I saw a comment about like what kind of local opposition did we face. People were wondering, Dallas is a car-oriented city. We're developed post after the cars and highway system in Dallas. It's pretty robust. We have huge thoroughfares and a downtown loop. So making sure people understood that this doesn't mean that parking won't get built in Dallas. We're still going to have users that ask for parking. Our development community architects are still understanding that, but they have a lot more flexibility and creativity now to build the types of developments that I think our council and communities want to see more of. They love going to a local restaurant or to which we removed requirements for under 2,500 square foot restaurants. We love our historic buildings. We removed requirements for historic buildings built before a certain year. So this was all trying to tie back into solving the problem of, if there is a problem with spillover parking, can we get better parking meters? Can we start looking at parking benefit districts and getting revenue put back into the community? Those are like some more long-term goals that hopefully city staff is continuing to work on. But again, these were, gradual changes, and the market, I think, is responding. We set the levels basically at, for, multifamily now, it's one space per unit above 200 units. It's half a space per unit for 20 to 200 units in housing, and it's no parking requirements for 20 units or less. So Dallas is doing a really good job of, I think, snowballing its efforts from the comprehensive land use plan update to parking reform. Now we're going to incorporate parking reform into our development code update. There's some new state legislation that is also setting the level of parking to one space per unit. Senate Bill 840 in Texas. So it's kind of become more of the industry standard, and I think that was also helpful. The local opposition wasn't quite as loud as it or organized as I think our forward Dallas comprehensive land use plan vision was. So once we got an agreement from our city council, that plan passed 11-4. Like, generally speaking, we kind of know the direction we're going now as a city, and parking was one of the next steps to implementing that vision.
So in terms of the parking reforms that finally did pass last year, I'm curious what compromises kind of happened along the way in order to get to something that could win a vote and become policy. And are there regrets that you guys have, or things that you would want to follow up and tackle going forward that you didn't get to in this set of reforms?
Well, some of us stuck with, first of all, I'll say this for the community opposition. Yes, it passed about a year ago, and no, the sky did not fall in Dallas. That's what we predicted. It didn't we didn't implode like people thought we would. There were, it was part strategy, part just like true belief. There were some advocates, and then I was one of them, that pushed for no minimums along with Andrea the whole time. And I think that helped have some leverage from a political standpoint to bring people from the other side a little bit closer. And I had it in my head all along, and I know Andrea did too, that there's no way we're going to get no minimums through, even though that would be so simple for the permit office and everybody else. But the main focus, wouldn't you say, Andrea, was on the multifamily, because the restaurants, it
Yeah,
really,
it's both.
the restaurants somewhat too, but there was a lot of like really great, compelling stories about smaller restaurants that couldn't get their COs because they couldn't operate in the older parts of town, and that's where we were, had another council member who was in the weeds on this stuff with me, and I think bringing that council member along kind of helped having those stories. But I feel like the multifamily was what we just had to go back and forth with a million times. You agree?
Yeah, I agree. And that's why I know that in the heat of the moment, I was, as I said, I don't lose the goalpost. There's no minimum. And I was a little bit, okay, we didn't do the full no minimum. However, taking a little bit of a pause and looking at it, it is a true reform. Like, the minimums that we have right now are basically what the market delivers anyway. And I think our big problem in Dallas is over parking, and we need maximums. And you did stall my idea that I was gonna say we're not done. I'm not gonna I know, but I wanted some design standards. I wanted a transportation demand management plan, just because it's so car centric, and I want to deliver also good and safe urban form as well. Big compromise that we did was, yes, with multifamily, but I think where we ended is absolutely amazing, because those 20 units, I know every number is arbitrary, 20 is arbitrary as well, but we all agreed that we do like infill housing, and we would prefer to have infill housing and that to have better urban form. So council members, it was easy to explain it on a small lot. Very easy, and they would immediately click. It's harder to explain. Everybody envisions multifamily like a big giant thing. So I think that was a big win for me. It was a compromise, because we started from one per unit, everything multifamily, and then we kind of walked ourselves into a better solution. But we also have a bonus for affordable housing. You can go to 0 if you give us a little bit of affordable housing, which is good. Another, like, it was a consensus on restaurants. I think the bars were also a big no-no. It was a hot topic in commercial amusement, these assembly type of spaces, which I keep on saying, you don't drink and drive, you don't want to incentivize that. However, for the comfort of people, that was a compromise. Probably the biggest compromise that we did, and I am going to be a little bit sour about it, is that we had to carve out one portion of the city. And we found out the portion of the city where the community was the loudest and the most powerful. Very small one. It's a mixed use. It's all type of small restaurants. Is very hip, and is going to continue to be a mixture of mainly restaurants and bars. And it's right like along a street that borders single family neighborhoods. And those neighbors were kind of like fed up, and they were trying to like regulate bars and restaurants via parking. We couldn't find a way to compromise with them, and they wanted out, and their council member, their commissioner find a way to get them out. And I think that was probably the biggest compromise. The second that was out and they were fine, I think everything was smooth sales. Another wonderful there are two other wonderful compromises that we've done. One is that a few council members wanted us to come back because the sky is going to fall, and they wanted to show the community is not going to, so therefore staff has to give us reports every 2 years, which I cannot stress this enough. I know it sounds cumbersome. Is the best PR strategy. Like, I would recommend this, to put this from the beginning to say, that's how you show your hand. Like, look, I'm not kidding. If it doesn't work in 2 years, we're going to show you that it doesn't work. So I'm very happy about that compromise. And it did bring, I think, 2 votes along. And another big one was parking for ADA or ADA parking, which I don't like it. It was a good compromise. It got us a little bit more comfort and a little bit more votes at the council. But this is a cautionary tale for all the reformers. Please do not disregard that. I know, for instance, Austin, they eliminated, they went to 0, but they kept parking for ADA, and they kept their old ratios to calculate the ADA back into that. So it's not, Another one for multifamily guest parking, loading. So it's a lot, but yeah, it takes 6 years. You think of all of those. We did a little bit of compromise, but at the end of the day, I think the city is at 0.
I want to make sure we're welcoming questions from the audience here. I've got one eye on the chat, but certainly feel free to post your questions, and we'll try to pose them to our panel. Or use the hand raise feature in Zoom. Either way, I think one other question that I had on my list, while we see if any of our audience members want to ask something, is about sort of the role of the real grassroots advocacy. We talked a bit about that one-on-one persuasion, talking with the council members, addressing their concerns, but from the position of the activist who can get 50 people out to the public hearing when it counts, what function does that actually serve? The 50 people at the public hearing probably aren't in that moment changing the mind of anyone up at the dais, but what function does that serve? Why is it important? And I always ask, whenever I'm talking with an elected official or city staff, like, what is your advice to grassroots activists, both in terms of do's and don'ts? Is there something that grassroots folks do that actually makes it harder for you to do your job? I'd be curious about that too.
I think Chad's asking me to.
Yeah, you want to take it first?
Sure.
I feel like I threw like 3 questions at you at once.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, but
you're good. Hopefully we didn't do anything that was harmful to the movement. We had email templates. We had what we called packed city halls. We let people know like when an important vote is coming up or briefing. So that's when they see our shirts or members in the audience, they know that people are monitoring this, and it's counterweight to any opposition. I think at the final briefing or day of the vote, it was overwhelmingly in favor, like 45 or 50 people speaking in support and 5 or 10, if that, opposed. So like it was I think, really powerful. I think it made the council feel more comfortable with what was being proposed, uh, giving them, cover as part of our role as advocates too, and empowering our council members with the information and the knowledge that uh, they need to know that their voters support them, their constituents support them. We're very intentional about our organizing efforts at the Dallas Housing Coalition being very low barrier to entry. Anyone can join at no cost as long as they align with our mission, vision, and values. We're coming from all 14 city council districts. We have nonprofits, faith-based, community-based organizations, academic groups, both nonprofit and for-profit developers and mixed income developers. So that's, I think, part of our biggest strength is our diversity and our numbers now, being over 450 members. So that all focus on housing. And we know that Dallas is becoming unaffordable. We saw research from Sightline how parking added 40 to 70% of housing costs, were driven by parking. And so if Dallas, wants to get ahead of its affordable housing crisis, which is continuing to grow, we're now at a shortage of 46,000 multifamily homes for people making less than 50% of our area median income. We do have people who are ready to buy homes, but those inventory for home ownership don't exist in terms of the missing middle housing, which we're having an event on tonight with Dan Paralek. So if anyone wants to go to our social media page and watch a live stream about missing middle housing, you need parking reform to have missing middle housing. You need IRC, International Residential Code updates, and fire safety and single stair to have missing middle housing. And that's where we sorely need to convert people. If I think we have to convert some 3,400 people a year and build 3,400 homes a year to get closer to a 50-50 equilibrium of renters and home buyers in Dallas. Right now we're at 61% renter households. So we have our work cut out for us here. We're continuing to beat that drum about housing affordability, and happy to connect with anybody who's on the webinar or watches this later about our strategies. So that's what's been most effective for us.
I would piggyback onto that. Like Bryan's group does a really good job. They're like a model group for really balancing, getting their point across and doing it in a respectful way. There's in politics, it's often the people that don't support something, that are against something, that show up. They're more incentive fired up to show up, right? If they're trying to kill something than if they are in support of something. Because I think people generally in support of something think that their elected officials are going to do the right thing and support what is generally good policy, right? It's nationally accepted good policy. That's not always the case. And so your rooms are often packed with the negative folks to give us cover. There are some council members who will literally do what the 20 people in the room tell them to do. I swear on our council, right, Andrea? You don't have to name them, but there are a couple that will, oh, I'm going to listen to the community. Well, there's 20 community members out of 1.9 million people. That's who's dictating policy. The majority of us, I would like to think nationwide too, hopefully, are going to look a little further than that. But what I think from an advocate standpoint, like an organized group, like what Bryan does so well, is showing up when you can, knowing the important meetings to be at, because you can't be at everything. You can't do a rally cry for every single meeting that we have. There's too many, and these people work, right? And so picking the important meetings, being polite and respectful, and not yelling and screaming at people, because we're getting that from the other side. So you be like the ray of sunshine that comes in, and then mix in your speakers and have some that present data and information that we can use later, and then others tell personal stories about how this bad policy has impacted them. Having diversity is important too. Seeing people of all different backgrounds, ages, color, all of that. And then I don't want to like let the piece of social media go untouched here. I'm not really on it anymore, and so I get attacked all the time as like the new urbanist guy on council. But um, I had people on there for me that are part of my team, but advocates who will go on when council members or policies are getting bashed and not necessarily jump in the mud to defend them, but like poke holes or ask questions about, okay, well, why are you saying this about this reform? Like, here's the data I have, and how does this fit in? Like, just sort of like muddy it up. So it's like, or clear it up ideally. But being that we appreciate it so much because we just get attacked all the time. We signed up for this, right? So it's acceptable for that. But having somebody back us up with facts and just a reasonable voice, that translates later to us, even if we don't know them, being more open to like their position, whatever that is. So social media protection or defense is important, but showing up in person when you can is great. The email campaigns are important too. You'll get 1,000 emails from one side. Having that email campaign is important too. So it's all of it.
Thank you so much for that. I can definitely, echo, I think what you said. I've seen this in a lot of cities. Part of the secret sauce, I think, of the movement for parking reform and other land use reforms, pro-housing reforms, is just the vibe of coming in and being polite and being the ray of sunshine, as opposed to the sort of angry, you're trying to ruin the city, you're trying to it's really palpable in a lot of those rooms. And I think that people who are maybe less ideologically committed on the issues can look at that and say, well, this looks like the party I want to be at over here. Like, I feel like that matters a lot. Thank you all for your insights. We can go a few more minutes here if anyone in our audience has questions they'd like to ask, or if anyone on our panel has some closing thoughts that you didn't get a chance to say that you'd like to say.
I will have closing thoughts, but I don't want to take it from the Q&A though.
I think go for it. And if questions come in, we can still hit up some questions.
I just wanted to like take this moment of privilege to like say like public thank yous to Councilmember Weston and Bryan Tony, like really what it means again to have this from a staff, and it's not just me, it's our entire team. I think it does send a good message to the planning community, to us as a city, to everybody who's looking to have a career in planning, like to be able to be heard. And I think I have no words to say. Like the parking reform in us is always gonna be a highlight and the badge of honor of my entire career from again Bucharest and Dallas, right? And I also wanted to give a big shout out to the Parking Reform Network because it's tough, but when you find your people, like it's such invaluable work that you guys are doing. And there were so many moments that I was like, told you have to have a steady hand, but it's hard to get to the steady hand. And in order for you to get it and hold it, you need your village. And you guys were my village in a lot of dark moments. So I do wanted to give a big shout out to all of you and the entire community and how accessible you are. And the fact that Tony Jordan would reply to my text messages at every second, a day and night. And all of them are just very technical things. And to have a technical expert at your fingertips, I think that's absolutely amazing. You guys put us in contact, you gave us credibility as staff, and you put us in contact with Don Shoup. He came to Dallas. You gave us direct access to Todd Littman, who talked to us for free, just to like talk to us and keep the reform moving. And that's hard. Like it's hard to get on a national level at the scale that you guys do. And every blog that I'm getting into or every chat that I'm getting it with you guys, it's always filled with experts. And that is, I have no words. I think honestly, like of course I cannot say this at City Council, but I think Parking Reform Network, what it did for me personally to be able to keep my steady hand is invaluable. And I wanted to tell you that. And publicly again. Bryan came at the end and packed it up, and Councilmember West was my ray of light for these 6 years. So it's when serendipity happens, you have to like just be humble and love it.
I can jump in. I saw that Tony mentioned Enrique McGregor, and yes, he definitely deserves a huge shout out. He was our plan commissioner for District 1 through, I think, the duration of the parking reform discussion. And now he's on the Dallas Area Rapid Transit Board as my appointee there. And so he's been a huge advocate and really went in the weeds and went to battle for us on this. But yeah, I want to just echo everything Andrea said. Appreciate you guys for your advocacy. And I think there's going to be a point in the next couple years where we can chip away at this further, in Dallas. And I think taking the wins that we can take now, was a smart move, and not just trying to like go all the way in, because we would have lost people. There's no way we were going to carry the whole council to minimums, no minimums. Um, but I think maybe so we've moved our elections now from May of odd years to November of odd years, which should increase voter turnout. And what we've seen, so this will start in November of 27. What we've seen in other cities, including Austin, is you generally over time will get a wave of slightly more moderate, open-minded, progressive type people that will come in and vote council members in. I think over time it's going to get just better and better in Dallas as we become more of a walkable city. That's my hope anyway. But thank you again for having me, and would love to come back anytime.
Thank you.
Were really helpful to us. Thanks, Tony and Daniel and all the other advocates across the country. Like, hugely helpful to be able to point and cherry pick and use and Dallasify everything that we needed to do to make it fit our context. So I just say thank you and keep going out there. You're still working on it.
Thank you all for the kind words and for your work on this. Incredible to see what you've managed to do in Dallas, and I know there's more to come. Bryan, I get all your DHC emails now, so I'm up on missing middle housing and everything else that's in the pipeline, and I'll have to get down to Dallas sometime and see what's good down there. But thank you all so much for joining us today for a great discussion. Really, really great to be able to celebrate what you've done.
Well, thank you all for having us.
Yes, I think I'm going to wrap the session, so I'm going to jump in real quick. Thank you again for being here with us today. I think it was an amazing panel, really interesting discussion, and thank you for the kind words. And as you said, Andrea, I think it's powerful when people come together. So thanks for being that example. I'm just going to, for our audience, I'm going to paste in the chat our Luma calendar for future events, the link to join our network if you like to. If you like this panel, it was an amazing panel, so I hope you join. And the feedback form, because we always love to read your comments. If there's anything else you would like us to include for future events, ideas, etc. It's a less than a minute feedback form, so I highly encourage you to fill it out if you can. And yeah, so thank you so much, Councilmember Chad West, Andrea, and Bryan Tony. Thanks for being here with us. And with that, I encourage everyone to unmute yourselves and say goodbye while I close the session. Thanks so much.